and good morning. Welcome to Trader's Espresso for the morning of Wednesday, March 7th, 2018. And what's in the news right now is the Gary Cohn resignation. That's the big news of the day. We found out late in the afternoon yesterday. And as soon as that news came out before the futures markets opened back up again at 6 p.m. Eastern time. As soon as they did, they gapped down, and they gapped down hard. The Dow Jones at one point, let me zoom in here so you can see it. This was the close yesterday. This was the open at 6 p.m. Eastern time after the news came out. And it then proceeded to trade down. At one point, the Dow futures were down as much as 425 points, I think it was. They're since off of their lows of the overnight session, but the Dow is currently down 244 points, so it's down 1%. The NASDAQ futures are down about a little bit more than 0.5%. The S&P are down almost 0.75%, and the Russell are down 0.4%. You can see that VIX is elevated, and that VIX futures are elevated. You can see that bonds are up. The 10-year Treasury futures are up. The yield is down 0.7%. The bonds are up on a flight to safety play. With the market falling, that has led to a flight to safety trade into bonds. No such flight to safety with gold. Gold is down 24 basis points. Let's see what the Japanese yen is doing. The yen against the dollar, I would have expected it to strengthen. Well, the US dollar against the yen would weaken. It's down 32 basis points, so that means the yen is stronger. And this was yesterday, so you can see that this is a reaction to the news. So the implications for Gary Cohn leaving the administration are very important. Gary Cohn was considered a tempering voice in the administration, a tempering influence on Trump. So he's no longer there. Evidently, the resignation came about as a result of a confrontation that he had with President Trump yesterday, and then he shortly thereafter resigned. The meeting that he had brokered or scheduled for Thursday as kind of one last-ditch effort to expose Trump to some of the voices so that maybe he would change his mind on tariffs, that meeting was canceled. So Steve Mnuchin is the only free trader really left in the administration, and he seems to be somebody who toes the line more than anyone else. I mean, he came out yesterday and said, this was shortly after Gary Cohn's resignation, came out and said that trade wars don't have to be a losing proposition, that, something along those lines, that they don't have to be a losing battle or whatever, trying to downplay the negative impacts that tariffs are going to have on the U.S. economy. So bottom line is the markets are taking this very poorly. There was some speculation about whether or not Gary Cohn was going to resign. Jim Cramer came out yesterday and said that if it, that would be the worst thing that could happen to markets. Well, clearly he was right. This notion that, the trade war posturing, the tariffs and all of this is just political posturing. This is just political showmanship. I think we can pretty much dismiss that notion. This is serious business. Our trade partners are talking about retaliation. The Chinese are talking about retaliatory measures. I haven't heard anything on if Japan is planning anything. I know that there's an escalating dialogue between President Trump and the Eurozone. So that's kind of where we sit right now. I would expect, even though the futures are off of their highs, when the market opens, I think that we're going to see another draft downward. We're going to have more volume come into the market. There's going to be, some sell stops that are triggered. That's why we saw this huge drop yesterday in, I'm not even looking at, in the index futures. This was a bunch of sell stops getting triggered. So I think that with volume coming in, at the bell, we'll probably see another downdraft. I would wait and see. Probably give it a 5 or 15-minute bar to see what direction it's going to head, and then you can probably, whatever that trend is, if it goes above the high of the 15-minute bar, if it goes below the low of the first 15-minute bar, you can probably trade that. Be careful though, because headlines can come out and they can whipsaw things in the opposite direction. So just make sure you've got stops in place. As far as economic data is concerned, ADP came out and said that the economy added 235,000 jobs. The expectation was for 195,000 jobs. Our trade balance figure came out. The estimate was negative 55.1 billion, so 55.1 billion more in imports and exports. That number came out at a negative 56.6 billion. 45 minutes from now, the Bank of Canada will announce their interest rate decision. Bank of Australia announced theirs. They stood pat, so they sounded like they were taking a little bit more of a dovish posture, not announcing like the Bank of Japan had on Friday of last week that they would be considering exit of their monetary easing anytime soon. So, on that point of this first downdraft when the bell opens, people have had 15 hours or so to debate it, and I don't know whether they're coming up with, though this isn't as bad as we thought. I mean, if the market's trading up, then that probably tells me that people realize it's not as bad. That's just a pure guess. Or they could look at it from the perspective, oh, well, Trump will find somebody to replace him. Well, Trump's going to find somebody to replace him who's not going to argue with him. So that's something to consider. Or you could look at it from the standpoint of, okay, now the trade warriors are on the ascendancy in the White House. This is just going to get worse. We don't know. I guess time will tell. But like I said, the first 5 to 15 minutes after the opening bells rings is going to be critical, and that's going to be what kind of determines what the trade day should look like. So what's interesting is, as far as global markets is concerned, the Asian markets were all down. They opened fresh after this news came out. The European markets, believe it or not, are currently up. The UK market, the German market is up. The Italian market is up. The French market was the only one that was down, and it was down about 0.1%. And the stock 600 is down, but that's down 0.01%, so that's pretty marginal. So a little bit of a mixed reaction globally. Eurozone GDP came out. That may be a little bit what's tempering any negative impacts on the market. The Eurozone GDP came out exactly as expected. The quarter over quarter was a 0.6 estimate. It came out on 0.6, and the year over year was 2.7 estimate. And the previous number was 2.7, and it came out at 2.7. So that's right on the money. The European Central Bank will announce their rate decision tomorrow, so that'll be something to watch as well. That will definitely move the euro, some other currency pairs, and it will move our markets, to be sure. So I will wrap it up here, and I'll see you in the live stream at 9:30 Eastern Time. Thanks for checking out.